Okay, so let's just jump right in. Imagine this. What if every single person, like everyone you met today, told you the absolute truth? No filters, no white lies, none of that sugarcoating we do. Would it be freeing? Or maybe, honestly, a bit frightening.
Oh, that's a powerful starting point, isn't it?
Oh.
Really gets you thinking.
Yeah, it's straight from our source material for this deep dive, and it kind of sets the stage for what we're exploring today.
Exactly. Our source talks about this idea of the transparent truth.
Yeah.
And it's more than just, not lying.
Right. It's not just avoiding the little fibs. The source describes it as um, truth with absolutely nothing held back, honest, raw, maybe even uncomfortable sometimes.
But potentially transformative.
Exactly. Transformative. It's about, I guess, the courage to be completely seen, warts and all.
And that's what we're digging into today, right? The potential impacts of that kind of transparency, how it could ripple through, well, everything. Our relationships, work, even government.
And ourselves, yeah. Our own inner world. The source paints this picture that sounds, I don't know, both amazing and kind of terrifying at the same time.
It definitely sets up a tension. It sounds utopian in one breath and
Yeah,
potentially chaotic in the next.
totally. So let's start where the source does. This gap between truth as this, like, virtue we all admire and the reality of how we communicate.
Yeah, it's interesting because we all say we value honesty, but our daily lives are often full of, well, softening things, aren't they? Dodging directness.
We do. We use those little white lies, as the source calls them. We filter things to spare feelings, or maybe just to protect ourselves a bit.
And it's not always malicious, right? The source points that out.
Yeah.
It's often about trying to be kind or just keep things smooth.
Sure. But the question the source raises is, does all that filtering actually serve us in the long run? Or are we just, choosing comfort over clarity most of the time?
That's the crux of it, which leads directly into how this kind of radical honesty might impact our closest relationships.
Oh, yeah. Imagine, like the source suggests, consistently hearing and speaking the unvarnished truth. Things like, actually, I'm not happy in this relationship right now.
Or, on the flip side, maybe something incredibly vulnerable like, I love you more than I've ever actually managed to say out loud.
Wow. It feels like it would put everything under a huge magnifying glass, wouldn't it?
For sure. The source basically argues that relationships built on, let's say, shaky ground, unspoken stuff, half-truths, they probably wouldn't survive that level of honesty.
They'd likely just crumble.
Right. But the flip side is that the really solid connections,
Yeah.
the ones based on genuine affection and respect, they could become incredibly strong, fortified even.
That makes sense.
Huh?
Okay, so shifting gears a bit, what about the workplace? The source sees transparent truth having a big impact there, too.
Yeah, it envisions it acting almost like a solvent, dissolving all that ambiguity we often deal with at work.
The passive-aggressive emails, the meetings where no one says what they really think.
Exactly, all that stuff. The source suggests that if you had to confront the hard realities directly without the usual corporate speak or maneuvering.
Things could actually move forward much faster. Less noise, more signal.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Progress could potentially accelerate because you're dealing with the actual issues head on.
It's a compelling idea. And if you scale that up even further to the level of government,
The source gets pretty bold here. It proposes that if transparency became the absolute default setting,
secrets would have nowhere to hide.
pretty much, the idea is that the kind of secrecy that often allows corruption or, political maneuvering to flourish, it just couldn't survive in that environment.
So accountability would naturally increase because everything's out in the open.
That's the theory. The breeding ground for unethical stuff would shrink dramatically.
Yeah, it does.
It does make you think about how different things might operate.
It really does. But okay, the source doesn't just stay at that macro level. It brings it right back down to the individual, to us.
Yeah, the internal shift. And this is where, for me, it gets really fascinating.
Me too. The source talks about the freedom that could come from just admitting our vulnerabilities, saying things, even just to ourselves initially, like, I actually don't have it all together, or I'm scared I'm not good enough.
And the key insight there, I think, is that in a world geared towards transparent truth, those admissions wouldn't necessarily lead to shame.
Right. It could lead to connection instead, like recognizing that shared humanity.
Exactly. The source suggests it's a way to let go of that immense pressure to always seem perfect, always in control.
Okay, but let's be real. The source acknowledges this isn't easy, right? There's a cost.
Oh, absolutely. It's stated very clearly, truth has a price. It directly challenges the images we project.
The masks we wear, the different personas for different situations.
All of that. The source lists things like um, our comfort, our sense of control, even potentially some relationships that might rely on a certain level of, well, pretense.
Yeah, that list makes you pause. It forces you to ask, what am I actually willing to give up for this kind of authenticity?
But then it immediately flips it and talks about the gains, the rewards,
Sure.
things like genuine authenticity, deeper connections, real clarity about yourself and the world, and building trust that's based on,
Mm.
you know, actual vulnerability, not just appearances.
Okay, and this is really important. The source makes a point of saying this transparency isn't about being cruel, right?
Crucially important, yes. It's not a license for brutal honesty delivered without empathy, not truth as a weapon.
So it's about how you tell the truth.
Exactly. The source stresses telling the truth with kindness, but crucially, without compromising the truth itself. It's about speaking with integrity, and just as vital, listening with real honesty too.
Okay, so if we manage this, if transparent truth became the norm, what would people be like? How would we change?
The source paints a picture of people becoming, well, bolder, maybe, braver, arguing less about trivial things perhaps, and connecting more on a meaningful level.
Less performing, more living.
That's a great way to put it. Less focus on the performance of being okay, and more energy put into actually being.
And I really liked this idea in the source, that every time one person chooses transparency, it's almost like an act of service.
Yeah, that resonated with me too. The idea that your honesty gives others permission to be more honest themselves. It creates ripples.
Like building a culture of authenticity, one conversation at a time.
And this connects to another interesting point the source makes, that truth isn't some static, fixed thing. It's relational.
Meaning, it happens between people.
Right. It emerges in that space where someone speaks with real intention and someone else genuinely listens not just to the words, but maybe to what's underneath them too. That's where understanding and truth can actually bloom.
That makes sense. So why is it so hard then? Why do we resist this kind of openness?
Well, the source suggests something quite deep. That maybe we've become afraid of truth because fundamentally we've become a bit afraid of ourselves.
Ugh. Tell me more about that.
It uses this powerful image of wearing identities like clothes. We get so used to the roles of the good employee, the perfect parent, the funny friend, that we kind of lose touch with who we are underneath all those layers. Hiding from others becomes hiding from ourselves.
And the source says being transparent isn't just about being truthful with other people.
No, and this might be the harder part. It's about being radically honest with yourself.
That internal truth-telling.
Yeah, the kind that, as the source puts it, can crack your ego wide open. It might lead to that uncomfortable but maybe freeing place of admitting, you know what, I actually don't know who I am right now.
But that admission isn't the end point, is it?
No, paradoxically, the source suggests it's the starting point. It's the space where you can actually begin to find out who you truly are without the old pretenses.
And this leads to another concept in the source, this idea of stepping out of duality, like the public self versus the private self.
Exactly. If we were living in this state of transparent truth, those lines we draw would just blur, maybe even dissolve altogether.
Imagine that. Not constantly managing the gap between who you project and who you feel you are inside.
And the source argues this wouldn't lead to chaos, interestingly. It suggests it would actually lead to more compassion.
How so?
Because we'd start seeing our own struggles reflected in others more clearly. We'd recognize maybe that someone's anger is masking pain, or their perfectionism is hiding fear.
Or that their difficulty with truth mirrors our own sometimes.
Right. And when you see that shared vulnerability, that shared human struggle, judgment tends to fall away and empathy grows. The source talks about recognizing we're all just trying to remember who we are.
That's quite profound. So, okay, this sounds huge. How do we even start? It's not like flipping a switch overnight.
Definitely not. And the source is very practical here. It emphasizes that truth is a practice, not a performance or a sudden state you achieve.
A practice, like meditating or exercising.
Sort of, yeah. Something you cultivate. It suggests starting small, simple things, like pausing before you automatically respond, speaking with a little more conscious intention, maybe gently catching yourself in those small, polite, almost automatic lies we sometimes tell.
Okay, so small, intentional actions. And what happens when you practice this? What are the potential results?
The source describes feeling lighter, less burdened by pretense, gradually becoming less concerned with whether people like you, and more committed to just being real, more aligned with yourself.
So bringing it all back around then, that initial question, what kind of world would it be if we consistently told each other the truth?
I think the source's answer, ultimately, is that it would be a world where we are fundamentally more free.
Free. Not because it's always pleasant, but because...
Because it's the place where we stop hiding, where we allow ourselves and each other to be seen without the masks, beyond the roles.
Where we can actually connect with the real person underneath.
Exactly. And the source leaves us with this really powerful thought, that maybe the beginning of real peace isn't in finding the perfect words or agreeable answers all the time.
But in the messy, sometimes uncomfortable, but ultimately transformative power of transparent truth.
It certainly gives you something to think about, doesn't it? Regarding your own life, your own conversations.
It really does. Maybe just one small step towards that kind of openness. Who knows what difference it could make?